Kevin, welcome aboard to the show. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
I've been looking forward to this, Ari, and we're gonna have a great conversation today.
Oh, I know that that's true because I had so much fun talking on your podcast. Tell us the name of the podcast. Give it a little promo there.
Million Dollar Relationships, and I think we've just released episode 306 or 307, and so and I will tell you, hosting that podcast for the last 3 years, Ari, has been the most rewarding and impactful thing I've done in my
So
30
you
years.
described it as life changing. Why was it life changing?
So, I've been the relationship guy for years, and I've been making introductions for years for entrepreneurs. But hosting the podcast, you talk about putting some rocket fuel behind what I do. That podcast allows me to get put in touch with entrepreneurs that I would have never had the opportunity to speak with if not for hosting the podcast. And it just keeps bringing amazing entrepreneurs into my world. And so, for example, I mean, just last week, one of my clients was looking to speak with somebody he doesn't normally speak with and stuff. And I just kind of made a note of that. And wouldn't you know it, that guy I interviewed for the podcast last week and stuff. And I'm like, you know what? Man, I've got a client and here's what he does and here's what he's looking for. He would really appreciate being able to speak with somebody like you. And Ari, I could give you story after
I don't
story
know.
after story like that.
So here's the problem, right? We're in a day and age where there is a group of people that are saying that, well, we have AI, we have Zoom, like we have all these things. Like, why do we really need to connect with human beings? Give us your take. Why is this building relationship? Why does it even matter nowadays?
Yeah. Well, my take is, especially in my world, it all comes down to trust, and trust in two things: trust in character
100%.
and trust in competence. And then for business to really take place, you need to have those two trusts, but you also need to have an alignment of values and interests. And it's that sweet spot right there, that intersection where those four combine, that's where magic happens and stuff. And that's what I get to do is I get to bring those right kinds of entrepreneurs together and just facilitate real, meaningful conversation. And that's how relationships get
So
started and stuff.
you dropped the bomb on us, which I think is incredibly important for us to dive into it. So
Okay.
let's do that for a second because you want to keep running. I want to dive into
You're gonna
this.
rein me in.
So what the hell is character? What does that mean and why is it important?
Character is how we show up. That is just how we show up, and the way we treat other people. Is our word good? When we say we're going to do something, do we do it? Do we follow through on that? And sure, we all drop the ball once in a while, but as a general rule, the way we show up, that's what our character is and stuff.
So you talked about do what you say what you do, right? You talked about integrity. Why is integrity part of character and why is it even important?
Well, in our world, we need to be able to trust people, and count on them that because we're making decisions based on what other people are doing too and stuff. And so it's really helpful if we've been told by somebody that, okay, they're going to have a deliverable to us by a certain date and time, and we're working on a big project that includes somebody that we are going to be having that delivery for. Well, it's really helpful if we can tell them that's going to be available here, knowing that that is going to be available there and
So
stuff.
we basically get punished pretty severely if other people don't meet their commitments. This never
Totally.
happens, right? This is not an issue in the world that we need to think about. Or is the world just full of people that don't have that basic integrity?
There's a lot of people that don't have that basic integrity. Yes.
So this is what I'm leading up to. And maybe the younger entrepreneurs just coming into this haven't kind of crossed this. Oh my Lord, have I met so many people who don't have integrity? They say something is blue, but it's actually red. They say they'll do it, they don't. And then there's a million exclusions. Oh, my grandmother died. I had one guy have 7 grandmothers die. I don't know how that's possible. Like the things that happen in this world are sometimes ridiculous. Let me ask you this. If you have a person who showcases themselves as basically breaking their integrity once, twice, when do you draw the red line?
Well, for me personally, I suppose it depends on the gravity of the situation, you know? Something simple like, hosting the podcast, for example. I have had people schedule time on my calendar to do a podcast and then not show up for that interview and stuff, you know? And so depending on how they respond to that, I'm most likely 99% of the time, I'm just gonna let them book another time. But if they didn't show up that time, well, now they're not gonna get another shot beyond that and stuff, you know? And I know I mean, heck, even this interview right here, as you and I are
This is true.
speaking, right before and the thing is I know too, when we use Riverside, I always get on about 5 minutes ahead of time because I know Riverside, it takes a little bit of time to get on the platform, you know? And but yet, I'm on Starlink, and Starlink, wouldn't you know it, Starlink goes down today. Right as and so I'm like, well, I got to go get my cell phone, turn on my hotspot, and we're going to use the hotspot to access the internet, you know.
Yeah.
And
So this is, I mean, but this, you're showcasing a personality, and there's many people like you that they're putting in the work to be prepared. And yeah, sure, shit happens, but you put in the work. That's a whole different ballgame. I had a gentleman show up to my podcast, and this was the short format that my daughter does. It's 10 questions. You have to come prepared. It's only 10 minutes, 5 minutes recording. He showed up, and I was like, "You're ready for the questions?" His question was, "What questions?" Now I must have sent out 8 emails with the, because I have it automatically going out to every single guest, right? And we record about 24 people over the weekend, right? That's 12 recordings over for an hour. We do them back to back. My daughter wants to kill me by the time she's done because she's the host. And he was like, "What questions?" And I'm like, "Sorry, we're not recording, and I need to think about if you're going to come back to this show, because you've taken a slot for somebody else now that could have done this and could have gotten their message out there, and that's just not cool." So you said values and interest. Okay, integrity, I get it. Competence, I think that's a no-brainer. If you're not competent, that's a problem. You have to be competent in what you're doing. You said values and interest. Tell me about values of interest. Why is that important?
values that so for me, I place a very high value on relationships, and so to do or to start to begin a conversation and a collaboration with someone who does not place a high value on relationships, well, now, I mean, that's
So
a
what does
very
that mean?
little.
Wouldn't everybody place high values on relationships? Why would somebody, like, that almost sounds like a no-brainer. Who have you kind of, not who is in name, but tell us the story of somebody that you've met that you're like, "Oh, they don't place value on relationships." How do they behave in that environment even?
You know what? And candidly, I don't know necessarily. I know that I had reached out to this one gentleman to schedule a podcast interview about a year ago, and he did schedule an interview and ended up canceling it prior to the interview because he said, Kevin, he's like, this question that you're going to ask me about my most valuable relationship, I don't have anybody that I can think of that I would want to talk about that's helped me that much. And I'm like, wow. And I was just blown
How
away.
can that be true? How can
Yes.
that be true?
Yes.
How can that be true? So,
Yeah.
okay, so there is a world where people don't value or don't create relationships, which I just don't believe that, because everybody's benefited from somebody. Maybe they just don't acknowledge it. That's a whole different topic. So, okay, let me ask you this. If I am an introvert, I'm a geek, I'm in my 20s, I spend 12 hours behind the computer in a dark room, and I'm describing myself in my 20s. How do I move from, that geek introvert, really very little relationships, to maybe just my close family, right? And some odd friends who can speak Klingon. True story. How do I move from that to a person who is strategically building relationships? Because I think everybody knows it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
So how do
Yeah.
I move from one to the other?
So I'm gonna assume that you want to move, for one, because a
That's a
lot of
great
times
point.
people in that spot, they don't wanna move. They're totally happy with where they're at and stuff,
That's right.
And
That's
if
right.
that's where you're at, you know what? Just stay there and be happy where you're at, Now, assuming you are that way and you want to move and just start engaging with other people, the easiest and the fastest way to do, I mean, my goodness, especially with technology, where we can hop on Facebook, we can hop on LinkedIn, and we can see all kinds of people talking about all kinds of stuff. And it's really easy to reach out. Say somebody's put an article up, say they put a video up. And because here's the deal. No matter who somebody is, no matter how successful they are, no matter how big of a business they run, no matter how great things look from the outside looking in, there's not a person on the face of this earth that gets too much appreciation. And
I love that.
when we just show genuine appreciation for people, man, we get their attention.
Okay, you emphasize genuine. I'm going to make an argument.
Okay?
Most people don't know how to give genuine appreciation. What does
Agreed.
genuine appreciation look like?
So genuine appreciation is so we come across an article that somebody wrote that really resonated with us, and we can communicate back with them and say, "Hey, man, I really appreciate this article and this part that you talked about here really landed with me, and just I just want to thank you for putting that out there and stuff." It's as simple as that.
Yeah. But
And
what's key about you just explained is that you referenced a specific part of the article. You gave detail about what you appreciated and why you appreciated. That's a huge difference. Most people are like, oh, great work.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
What work are you talking about? You ask a follow up question. Oh, just in general, you're doing great work. Do you
yeah.
believe that person now?
No,
No,
absolutely not. It's like what
absolutely not.
you know that
Absolutely not.
that's like one of those blank or broad message LinkedIn, outreach things you might get,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Exactly right. So let me tell you a short story. My son was being bullied.
Okay.
Okay. So I tell him, I won't tell the long story. I'm not being interviewed here, but I say to him this: you're going to compliment your bully every day. And then I explained to him what you just explained about it has to be a genuine compliment, a genuine appreciation. And he started crying because the idea of complimenting his bully who's tormenting him was destroyed my son at that moment. I forgot about this whole thing. Turns out he did it. A few months later, I'm like, how was your day? And then my daughter gets upset. And then my son says, oh, she doesn't like him. And I'm like, now, women and men think differently. I'll leave it at that. And then I'm like, who is that? What's his name? He mentions the name of his bully. He had turned his bully into a friend through that process. So this isn't just a way to build
Yeah,
relationships. This is a way to mend relationships,
totally.
even if they're broken.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting. I had a relationship that kind of just fell to the wayside years ago and stuff. And that's okay. It was fine. But I got a birthday card from that person this year on my birthday just last month. And I was like, wow. It totally shocked me, Ari. I hadn't had a birthday card in years gone by from this person, but I got one in the mail from them. And I was like, you know what, man, I'm going to shoot them a message. And so I did. I shot him a message and I just said, hey, wow, thanks so much for the birthday card. That really meant a lot. And I totally was not expecting that at all. And so now it started a dialogue. And now, in fact, a week and a half ago, we had a phone conversation too and stuff. And so you're right. It just that genuine appreciation and stuff can even mend relationships that might have fallen by the wayside or that even ended badly. So
Oh, it's crazy. And there's so many hacks to do that nobody's doing. I can't remember which politician it was, but I think it was it might have been Hillary. She used to take, I don't know, an hour a day to write out basically handwritten thank you cards. Handwritten. She would handwrite these cards, and maybe it was somebody else. I can't remember. But regardless of who the politician was, that's effort. When you put effort into doing that, it creates such an appreciation of the other side that it resonates, it sticks. And I think that's absolutely wonderful and so delightful. What other hacks, or maybe it's just hard work and you need to do the work. What else would you recommend to the audience who's trying to build this appreciation of building relationships and how to sustain them?
well, so here's the thing. I love talking with entrepreneurs. I love hearing about what they're working on. I love hearing about what opportunities they're trying to take advantage of, what challenges or problems they're dealing with. And for me personally, my natural God-given ability, if you will, is I always just default to based on what they're sharing with me, who do I know that might be able to help them
Okay,
with
okay,
this?
stop. This is brilliant. You're basically taking the approach of helping people.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
Like if you can give somebody a compliment, that's and it's very, very real and sincere, I mean, that's great. But that's still just talk. It's cheap. But where you're saying now, I can introduce them to somebody that might change their life. I can tell you that my life was changed by many people that I've met. So if you've made that connection and changed their life, that could have infinite impact on that person's life. That's brilliant. This kind of philosophy of giving as a method to building relationships. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah, yeah.
What's a story? Do you have any stories where people came back to you and said, "Oh, this person you introduced to me, this was life changing"?
So I've been doing this kind of stuff for years. And so the first like really big connection that I made was 14 years ago for these two guys, Brian Kurtz and Perry Marshall. And at the time, Brian Kurtz was working at a company called Boardroom Reports. They were a huge direct mail company and they were trying to figure out the Google AdWords platform. And he was telling me how, man, we're just pulling our hair out with this thing because this isn't our thing. We don't understand it. And I'm like, well, you guys need to get a hold of Perry Marshall and his team. That's their thing. That's what they do. And he's like, do you know Perry? And I was like, yeah. It's like, I'll introduce you guys. And so I did that. And Perry's team did help out Boardroom with the Google AdWords platform. But beyond that, Brian and Perry just became great friends. And 8 months later, they're hosting this big event back in Washington, D.C. area called the Titans of Direct Response. There was about 300 entrepreneurs that flew in and invested financially and time-wise to attend that. And they did really well from that. And that's what first got me thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I had a business where I just got to do that all the time, you know? And 14 years later, that's been my full-time gig for, well, since 17, so 8 years now, it's been my full-time gig. And those 2 guys, they have gone on to make millions and millions of dollars together and also impact millions and millions of lives. And it's been so cool to watch what has come from that one conversation. And all because they were challenged and having a challenge with the Google AdWords platform, and I knew the guy to talk to, you know? And you know, and that's, you know, by just showing up with the intention to serve. And here's the cool thing is even when we're having these conversations with people, even if off the top of our head, because you know, not all people's minds work like I do, but even if we can't help them, if we just say, "Hey, you know what, man? Ari, I really appreciate what you shared with me, and I'm just gonna percolate on this for and if I can come up with somebody that I might wanna introduce you to, is it cool if I reach back out to you and stuff?" And just doing that alone will make such an impact on people because it just lets them know that we care, you know?
This is brilliant. I mean, the one sentence you said that I think captures it all is intention to serve. That is beautiful. If I can steal that from you, I mean, this is
Absolutely.
absolutely brilliant. Um, and that's it's explained so much. You have an intention, and it's the mindset of really serving others. How do you make a business out of this?
Well, it took a while to figure that one out too.
I have no idea. I don't even have a guess.
And I had to do a lot of getting out of my own head and coming, you know, to terms with my with because, you know, some of my thoughts used to be around, well, who do you think you are? Well, so Brian Kurtz, we'll go back to him. You know, about 4 or 5 years after I connected him and Perry, I was having a conversation with him. And I was telling him what I was thinking about, and I was like, you know, I'd really like to figure out how I can have have a business doing this, making introductions, making connections like that and stuff. And as we kind of were having that conversation, Brian tells me, he's like, you know, Kevin, I'm kind of like you. I love making introductions too. And man, I always do it for free. And
Yes, me too.
I couldn't even dream of charging people for doing that. And you know, and when I left that conversation with him, I ain't gonna lie, man, I felt really deflated. Man, I even started thinking, well, man, who am I to even be thinking of this? Maybe I'm completely off my rocker, you know. And it wasn't for a couple more years until another friend of mine said, well, Kev, you know, what if you just started asking people, hey, if I make a connection for you, if I introduce you to someone and it leads to revenue being created, would you be open to sharing some percentage of that with me? And he's like, Kevin, what how does that land with you? Do you feel like would you be comfortable asking that of people? I'm like, yeah, I could totally do that. He's like, well, just start asking people that when you're thinking about making introductions for them and see what happens.
in this book.
And so I did. And you know what, Ari? Hardly anybody said no to that. I
That's
mean,
brilliant. That's
99.9% of
brilliant.
people said, "Kevin, I would totally do that with you."
Do you make them sign a contract, or is this on
I
a
do now because
handshake?
it's not it's a really simple one. It's 4 pages, and it's very simple, and I charge a monthly retainer, and then we do a percentage of the revenue that comes from it and stuff. And I can tell you that people really appreciate that because they know that if I accept them as a client, they know that, like, you know what? Kevin's got skin in the game too and stuff, you know? And they really appreciate that. And I wouldn't even accept anybody as a client if I didn't. Well, for one, they're going to be a friend first because my kind of my litmus test and my rule of thumb is anybody that I accept to work with. I want to be able to invite them into my home for dinner with my family and I. And if I wouldn't do that, I got no business doing business with them.
That's brilliant.
And on the other hand, I just want to be totally excited about, like, this is going to be good. This is going to be so much fun when I bring them into my world and stuff.
Here's the I'm gonna guess. Keep me honest here. If you're gonna take that risk of introducing somebody, you're gonna kind of believe in them and trust in them. And if you wouldn't
100%.
invite them into your house, then that's a red flag.
Totally, totally. Well, and then here's the thing, because I've got relationships spanning back right now at this point, at the time we're doing this recording, 30 years. And so, all those relationships, every time I bring somebody into their world via an introduction, it has to further the relationship that I already have with that person.
That's
And
brilliant. So
so,
this is the win-win paradigm, right? This is not you asking for a favor. That's hard though. How do you figure out how to create win-win relationships? I mean, people can't figure it out just two people. How does a third person look at two people and be like, "Oh, these people would benefit from each other?"
well, so there's certain qualities that I look for in anybody that I would bring into my world. So the first thing, they have an already established business where they're making a big impact through that business. They also want to make a much bigger impact through that business. So which that means that they already know how to sell whatever it is that they sell and whatever they do in business. They already know how to do that. And on the other side of the coin, they are just some of the most giving and generous people you would ever meet. Their default position, they always show up ready to help, to serve, to contribute, to pour into others. And they couldn't show up any other way. That is like hardwired into their DNA. And so when you have those things in place, that's the stuff that I look for. And when I bring those people into my world, and I have no problem introducing them to other people that I've had long-term relationships with, and I have no problem asking for favors on their behalf as well, and helping in that way too. So,
I just The first part kind of makes sense, right? You have to have skin in the game. You have to have meat on the bone. That second part blew me away. Being willing, basically having this give first mentality and generosity. To me personally, that resonates deeply. But we see people out in the world that they have a very short term view. So I was having an argument because I basically lost a negotiation on purpose. And this guy comes up to me. All I'll say about him is that he worked for an air carrier company. And I lost the negotiation. He comes up to me and he says, "Ari, you have a reputation of one of the best negotiators. Why did you lose that? You had all the leverage." And I was like, "Yes, but I didn't lose it." And then he was like, "Well, you agreed to a 33, 33, 33 split with a negotiation. Clearly, you had 65% of the leverage. You should have taken 65% of the value." So I thought for a second how to respond to him. And I asked him, "What industry do you work in?" And he said, "Airlines." And I was like, "Okay. What's your main relationship?" And it's suppliers. Okay. How often do you switch suppliers? How often do you change suppliers? And it's like, "Oh, sometimes, multiple times per quarter." And I was like, "Oh, I see. There it is. There it is."
yeah, yeah,
So his whole life view was that relationships last a quarter,
yeah,
maybe two.
yeah,
That's his life view.
yeah,
And I said to him, "Sir, my relationships life last me a lifetime." And it's true that I gave up all this kind of equity of this deal, right? Millions of dollars. It's true. But I built two partners that are now going to
Yeah.
support me a lifetime. So if I
Mm.
now calculate the dollar value of that relationship that I've generated for them, they've generated for me, now we're talking about something which is 10x
Yes.
that deal that I gave away.
Yeah.
And he told me I was an idiot. No, really. He said that this is garbage when I'm talking. He said, no, you need to win the deal. You need to win it right now. And that's the art of the deal. And I said, the deal doesn't matter. It's the relationships you build. So
Amen.
these people are out there, they're doing business. Unfortunately, they're incredibly successful sometimes. How do you balance that? I mean, you and I have a very similar philosophy in life, but there's very different philosophies, and these people are winning.
Yeah.
How,
Yeah.
how do we how do we
Well,
digest that?
I'll answer that, and I wanna go back really quick to something you just shared too, because here's the other thing that we wanna take into account, because I look at relationships, going back. So I got this one friend of mine, Travis. I've known him since 2015, and he was really good at doing what he does back in 2015. But today, 10 years later, he is like infinitely better. Now he's got a whole team of people, and he's in 10 years, he has made so much progress. In 10 years, I have made so much progress. And so his and my relationship is far, far more valuable today than it was 10 years ago when we first met each other. And that's what continues to happen. And I have well, pretty much every relationship that I've had long term is that way and stuff. So, and as far as how we
Hold
stay,
on, hold on. I mean,
okay,
you told the story, but I want to double down on what you just said. What you're basically saying is that interest that relationships are like a bank account with interest that basically grows itself all the time,
all the time.
right? And if you plan on having a strategy of 3-month relationships or annual relationships, you're not going to build those relationships. They're not going to be long term. And if you have new relationships, they're not going to grow with all your old relationships because you're just treating them as if they're some kind of thing that you can take and pull and give and take. That's not going to grow. So your point is so well taken, right? Every relationship that you take a long-term strategy on is going to grow exponentially with the years. That is such a powerful point. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I forgot the other question you asked me.
So, I mean, I think you won that one with a slam dunk, right? I mean, when you talk about this idea of, relationships growing over the years, I think it should be apparent to any one of our listeners that the right way is to build long term relationships and not to treat people as they're disposable. No matter what you believe as a human being, you shouldn't treat people as disposable. But even in the business world, I would argue you shouldn't do that.
Totally.
So this has been absolutely delightful. We have 5 minutes left to the program. I have the question that I ask every single guest. It's the only scripted question in the program. In fact, there's no other question that you got from me ahead of time. It's a difficult question, though. If you had to go back to the hardest points in your life, maybe in your 20s, maybe another point, what would be the advice that you would give yourself and why?
You know, when I was a kid, when I was in 4th grade, my dad used to commute an hour each way to go to work and stuff from where we lived. And when I was in 4th grade, we moved to the town that he worked in so he wouldn't have to commute and he'd have 2 more hours at home every day. But in that process, we moved from a very small community where everybody knew everybody, where, I grew up in that community from the time I was born until the time I was in 4th grade at 9 years old. And now I was uprooted from all my friends, and now I go to a new school where I'm the new kid and nobody knows me. And by the same token, the other kids are like, "Who's this new kid?"
Who's this
You know,
guy?
and it was a rough start. And I definitely I didn't make friends in that new community like I did in the community that, but looking at comparison. And all the way, my father, he passed away, or he got diagnosed with cancer at the beginning of my ninth grade year. He passed away at the end of my 10th grade year. And when that happened, my mom wanted to send my brother and I to a private school. And so we went to this private school. And so for all those years, from 4th through 10th grade, I never really fit in. But when we went to this private school, I had a friend of mine who went there. Him and his sister went there, and it was a smaller school, and they just immediately started introducing me to everybody in the school and
Wow.
stuff. And so I just right very fast, just made friends and fit in. And I'm like, and in fact, I'm like, man, I found my people again. And the last 2 years of high school were phenomenal. And in fact, man, I dated a lot of girls in the 11th and 12th grade. I took 2 girls to my senior prom, 2 beautiful girls to my senior prom. And and in that process, and I didn't discover this until years later when somebody I was doing an interview with pointed it out to me that, Kevin, maybe that's why you have been the way you have been for so many years is because you lost your people for a period of time when you were young and then you found them again and you know what that's like. And now you want to help other people find their own peeps. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, I never considered that, never put
See,
two and two together on that, but he was totally right, And, so for all of you who, because like entrepreneurs, it can be a lonely world for us.
yes,
Even on the top of the world, when we're running really successful businesses,
sometimes
it can be
especially.
lonely. And I just wanna encourage you, reach out to people and have conversations and find your peeps and stuff, and don't when you're going through rough times, man, that's the time to reach out and talk with people in your world and stuff.
Kevin, I cannot think of a more blessed mission than building community and pulling people into that community. I think truly that is amazing. I'm not a religious person, but when I think about the mission that you're on and why, it gives me goosebumps. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
My pleasure, Ari.